Gauteng TVET College. It is a webinar. When you look at our advert, it's about decolonizing education in South Africa with a focus on the marginalized, where we look at how to improve the educational attainment of the previously disadvantaged group and looking at how the education system can be improved in a way that bridges the gap between inequality and that it distributes resources, social resources to all all the groups of the country. So this afternoon or this evening, we have a wonderful line-up of esteemed experts who are going to help us to answer these very pertinent questions about the future of our country. I think we have come from the month of Women Month. We had to deliberate on a lot of issues, on issues that really affect women and where we come from as a country and where we are going and what are the steps that needs to be taken to really improve the way we support and the way we treat women in our country. And after the women, the biggest other issue is the issue of the youth. Where do we place the youth in the future of South Africa, especially the marginalized, which are the poor, the marginalized, which are the previously disadvantaged, so that they are part and parcel of what is going to happen in the future. One unionist used to say that when we neglect the young people and we leave them in the thrones of unemployment, we are really creating an army of the unemployed, and one day they will rise against all of us. So it's important that it is a country responsibility. It is all our responsibility that we are able to interrogate and really answer some of these questions. So with those few words, I just want to greet everybody who have registered and joined the webinar. And hopefully we are going to have a wonderful discussion, of course, with your participation. So if you look at from your screen, we have a chat box there. You can just comment and give input there. And if you have specific questions that you would want to ask, we have a Q&A tab there. You can just click on it as well and just ask a question to the panel. One person once said that nobody knows everything, but somebody knows something. So, and we believe that if all of us, sometimes the answer would not necessarily be with the panelist, but we might find that amongst the attendees, the answer is there. So my name is Sifiso Mukwena. I am a director in the advisory board of margins, and I also work for the Department of Higher Education and Training. And joining me as part of the panel this evening, I have guests that I will request them just after introducing themselves to greet the webinar by just opening by opening their mic and their camera and just greet the meeting so that the attendees can see who we are talking about. So firstly, we have Miss Ayanda Nota. So Miss Ayanda Nota is a senior student support officer at Southwest Gauteng, and she's responsible for psychosocial support. So she holds a BA psychology and an honors postgraduate in diploma in higher education. She's one of the co-founders of the psychosocial support department at the college, and it's a unit which was there, and then just she came in and really make it to run. She has been in the TVET sector for the last 11 years and really dealing with issues of psychosocial issues among students, providing students with various forms of support regarding their health and wellness. She's very passionate about the work with working with young people, especially young girls, and giving them a platform to self-actualize. Ms. Nota, can you just greet a webinar today?
Good evening. My name is Ayanda. As I've been introduced, I work for Southwest Gauteng TVET College, and I'm under the Student Support Services Unit.
Welcome, Ayanda.
Thank you so much.
And next to Ayanda, we have Miss Ntabiseng Mapale. She's also a senior student support officer, also responsible for psychosocial support at Southwest Gauteng TVET College. She holds a 4-year BA psychology qualification as well as a postgraduate diploma in higher education. She works with Ms. Nota, as I've indicated, in the unit that deals with psychosocial support at the college. So she has been in the TVET sector for the last 14 years, started in the classroom lecturing English and life skills. That is very interesting. And then she moved to student support services, dealing with psychosocial issues of students by providing students with various forms of support regarding their health and wellness. She's very passionate about youth development and takes a great joy in being part of young people's growth and having a positive impact on the students. Ms. Mapale.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I am Ntabiseng Mapale. Ayanda's colleague. We both work for Southwest Gauteng College under Student Support Services Unit. And as introduced, I am also responsible for psychosocial support for the students. But because there's two of us, we are divided. Ayanda works mainly with our urban campuses, and I'm working with the Soweto-based campuses. So yeah, so it's me and Ayanda working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ntabi. And then from the margin side, our very own researcher, we have Ms. Shannon Martin. She's a researcher for margins. She holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in sociology and criminology, where she graduated with first-class honors and distinction. She currently pursues her PhD at the Open University of United Kingdom, where she's looking at the decolonization of education. She's a dynamic researcher passionate about addressing educational inequalities through impactful research projects. Ms. Martin has an extensive experience in leading and collaborating with research teams and has contributed significantly to various initiatives. Ms. Martin will speak about the matters of the research that was conducted between the margins and Southwest Gauteng, as indicated in our pamphlet. Ms. Martins.
Hi everyone, I'm Shannon. As I've been introduced, I'm just coming to the end of my PhD, and I've been involved in a variety of research projects outside of my PhD on educational inequalities in higher education specifically. And I reached out to Siobhan, and I've been working as a researcher for margins. I've just joined the team, but I'm really excited to be here today. So thank you.
We are excited to have you at margins, and we are excited to have you tonight. We also have two colleagues of mine that I also work with in another platform. Firstly, we have Miss Ayanda Masina. Miss Ayanda Masina is an admitted attorney to the High Court of South Africa. She's the chairperson of Young Professionals in Gauteng in the Black Management Forum, and also the acting chairperson of the BBC, which is the Black Business Council Youth Portfolio Committee. In addition to holding these multiple degrees in politics, in law, and in philosophy, and belonging to a number of professional bodies, Ms. Masina is also a passionate advocate for youth and women. Ms. Masina will speak about and address youth marginalization and economic benefits of inclusion in the society. So, Ayanda, the platform is yours.
Oh, thank you, Spiso. Like Spiso said, my name is Ayanda Masina. Oh my gosh, I do a lot of things, but I am a tax consultant or tax specialist by profession. I used to be a tax lawyer in another lifetime, So that's my background, and I volunteer quite a bit in organizations that empower Black people, that empower the youth, that empower women. Like Sfiso said, Black Management Forum and the Black Business Council Youth and Young Professionals for the BMF. Yeah, and that's basically me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Ayanda. Last but not least, one comedian once said, last but not listed. We have Mr. Papama Mgadi. The Papama Mgadi is the national chairperson of the Black Management Forum Young Professionals. Before taking the helm of as the national chairperson, Papama was the provincial chairperson of the BMF in the Eastern Cape. He's an accomplished innovator, a thinker, a writer, a scholar, a musician. I didn't know that you're a musician, my leader. You must hit us with a note during the course of the discussion. And a proud advocate for creative economy, youth development, social entrepreneurship, and education. He was listed as one of Sunday World's unsung heroes for his efforts in social entrepreneurship, and is an accomplished sustainable development practitioner with a degree in architect and many achievements in the field of green building and sustainable design under his belt. Papama, can you introduce yourself to the meeting this evening?
Good evening, Sfiso, and good evening to the colleagues. What the biography did not say is that I'm a musician in the shower. So I'm grateful to be joining this important conversation and to be participating in this platform. Thank you also very much.
Thank you, thank you. Can we just have some reflections there and just clap hands and for our esteemed panel this evening? I just want to see reactions there to see that we are not alone. Yes, 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 yes. So I'm going to invite Shannon to present the findings of the research that was conducted between Margins and Southwest TVET College. We are going to start our discussion there and really find out what were the issues there, and then our discussion will grow from there. Shannon?
Hi, everyone. So hopefully you can see me. So firstly, I just wanted to just give a bit of, I guess, background context to the situation. So as I'm sure we're all aware, youth dropout rates are extremely high in South Africa, and almost half of the students drop out before they attain a high school or vocational qualification. Now, why is this important? While students dropping out of high school and vocational courses, it results in a less skilled population, and this then affects the nation relating to economic development, and also it affects the individual, as people who obviously kind of drop out of education, they struggle to gain employment and they lack the skills that are gained through education, which then impacts the possibility of being able to move socially upwards, as it's difficult to kind of climb the ladder when you're unemployed or marginalized. So the most affected group in relation to dropouts are Black students, and this is surprising when we think of it in kind of like a historical context of the end of apartheid and kind of the end of formal colonialism. And we would hope that given this, that racial inequalities will lessen and that there would be improvements in educational outcome and social mobility. However, what we're finding is that structural and systemic issues remain, which then represent the legacies of colonialism and apartheid, which then exacerbate the racial inequalities and also the chance for mobility. And the government have spent time pumping money into the education system through grants to subsidise higher education, with the aim to improve the educational attainment of previously disadvantaged groups. However, the returns for this investment are not presenting themselves, so the situation for disadvantaged groups continues to persist. And what this indicates is that there are other factors at play relating to school dropout outside of educational funding. And so this sets the scene for the research that's taking place at Margins, which seeks to to explore the impact of social therapy on dropout rates in educational institutions in South Africa. So what we're trying to do is to explore the impact of sociotherapy on TVET students, so students in TVET colleges. And just for a bit of context, sociotherapy is a form of rehabilitation therapy that combines the social and psychological to empower the individual. And this is done with the view that being that mental suffering, so for example, anime, isolation, marginalization, is the result of interpersonal relations or the absence of these. And so in the context of the TVET colleges, this initiative would look like looking at the individual as an extension of their social world. And so addressing both the individual condition of anime and reintegrating the individual back into society. So where we're at so far is we've got survey responses from a survey that we distributed to TVET students between the ages of 15 to 46 so far. And the findings are from 298 responses, or respondents, sorry, from 2 TVET colleges in Soweto and predominantly from Rudaport. So 93.6% of respondents were from Rudaport. And the findings show that there are a variety of risk factors, and we've identified a variety of socioeconomic, social and psychological factors that are impacting the experience of TVET students. And this is interesting because over half of the respondents actually reported that they join the TVET colleges because they do like it. So, so that's 55%. And almost 76% of respondents stated that they do currently enjoy their college experience. And a high percentage of 80.4% reported that they got into the program that they wanted. And a large percentage of the students that we completed the surveys stated that they aim to finish the TVET, so 88.3%. And furthermore, from our findings, the majority of students reported that they're not involved with drugs, violence, alcohol, or crime. So these statistics range from 70% to a high percentage of 98%. So if the majority of students have actively chosen to join the TVET and they enjoy their course and they aim to finish, and they're not involved, or they say and state that they're not involved in drugs, crime, alcohol abuse, or violence, then clearly we can speculate that there are other factors at play that are impacting the dropout rate. So we know that in order to be able to function as a human and participate successfully, in education and society, that we require access to food and a safe home base. And our initial findings indicate that a high percentage of TVET students report a lack of access to resources. And more than half of the respondents from our findings so far suggest that 51.7% are on government funding. And students feel as though they are not eating enough, so 40.9% reported this, with only 49.3% stating that they only have 2 meals a day. And even more concerning is that 9.7% of students report that they only have 1 meal a day. And as we know, a lack of nutrients will affect the ability of students to be able to concentrate at school and even have the energy to go to school and to get through a day in college side. Furthermore, 36.6% report that they aren't sleeping enough, and perhaps this is to do with the fact that some students report that they feel unsafe sometimes, so that statistic came in at 39.9%. And when we dig into the findings further, we can see that a variety of students report that they are experiencing abuse, whether this be physical, sexual, emotional. So the statistic on that is 29.5%. And although this statistic is not the majority, any amount of people who are experiencing abuse is a cause for concern. And when we consider the impact of traumatic abuse and the impact that this has on the likelihood of students to be able to finish their studies, we know that this can cause and exacerbate existing mental health conditions and contribute to dropout rates. And furthermore, 13.8% of students who participated in this survey reported that they hurt themselves. And this is obviously an indicating factor for mental suffering. And just as a side note, which is interesting and also could be a predicating factor for future dropout, students did report that there was a high reporting of sexual activity, and this raises concerns because of the associated risks such as pregnancy and the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. So in relation to housing, that has also arisen as a factor that can contribute towards dropout rates. So our findings report that a high percentage of students are experiencing overcrowding and that they share bedrooms. So for example, 18.5% report that they are in a bedroom with 5 or more people, and some students even reported that they were living with up to 21 other people. And within those numbers, 58.4% of students reported that they share a room. And if we think about kind of having your own space and being able to have the space to be able to concentrate on your education or your college experience, then we can see that this could be a predicating factor towards this and is an area of concern. And for TVET students, the dominant form of transportation that was disclosed was public transport. So 95% of students stated that they take public transport to college. And interestingly, 56% of students stated this themselves, that it was a direct factor for not being able to complete the TVET course. So they predicated that that might be a risk factor for them not being able to complete it. And then some other examples of self-identified factors for not finishing studies related to learning difficulties, a lack of resources, family problems, and unplanned events. And furthermore, there were factors that were outside of an access to resources, which related to support. So 33.6% of students reported that they don't have access to support if they need it. 34.9% reported that they do not find it easy to discuss their problems with others. And interestingly, 48.3% reported that they do not feel as though their needs for love and affection are being met. And perhaps this is a contributing factor as to why, not surprisingly, 29.2% reported that they do not belong. So the lack of support identified above increases feelings of anime, marginalization, and isolation, which increases the likelihood of dropping out. And perhaps the factors previously outlined explain why 54.4% of students stated in the survey that they skip college. And I wanted to raise another interesting finding, which was that the majority of TVET students who participated in the study described their mood as normal, so 66.8%. And this is interesting to note, and it emerges as an area for further investigation, as if we consider the kind of aspects that I've discussed earlier, the kind of risk factors and the experiences that these college TVET students have stated that they are experiencing, then we could say that this could be a form of kind of survival mode. So when people are in survival mode that and they're experiencing active trauma and they have a lack of access to resources and support, that they may not be as aware of their own lived conditions because of the circumstances that surround them. And just to end on a positive note for the findings, students do remain optimistic and despite the wide range of risk factors identified. So the majority of students stated that they will finish their studies and that they will achieve their dreams. And so this shows that there's not a lack of kind of motivation to succeed, even with the current circumstances that students are facing. However, the problems that are highlighted, they do encompass a variety of socioeconomic and psychological aspects combined, and this is why social therapy is being offered and introduced and is needed and will be conducted within this research project. So the next steps in the research will be to implement social therapy with TVET students, which tackle the individual, group, and societal level through implementing margins programs. And these include a self-awareness program. So it's a 16-week course on self-awareness and a 12-week journaling program. And they aim to increase mindfulness and self-awareness. And then Margin's self-awareness sponsor program and journal program will take place. Once the program is completed, the youth will kind of start up their own communities to support groups through the self-awareness program. And what this aims to do is to tackle isolation and increase acceptance and belonging. And finally, the Youth Against Marginalisation movement will occur, which aims to address the macro level of society. And this includes student encouragement to tap into existential well-being by effecting social change and justice through the Youth Against Marginalisation movement. So that's just a little insight on the findings and also what we are planning to do next. So thank you so much for joining us to hear about that.
All right. No, thank you very much, Shannon. Very interesting study. Looking at a policy point of view, from a funding point of view, how much money a government has put in higher education in the post-school and education sector, but you are looking at the results. If they are not, students are not dropping out, they do not finish their courses. And it was interesting to see that really some of the challenges that the colleges are facing or the students are facing, they are not just classroom issues. So they are the social issues has an impact on their performance. And you speak about the spaces that they share. I don't know if your research was able to check whether the students are staying with family or they are at renting while they are pursuing their studies, Shannon.
I would have to check the research findings again, but I'm not sure if Siobhan knows.
Yes, because perhaps we will bring in Ayanda and Tabi later just to give us an overview of their student population in terms of the setup there. Because one of the things that I found interesting when I was looking at the study was that you had 47% of the students indicated that they do not live with their parents, and even with those that lived with parents, we're saying it's only 27% who lived with both parents. And I'm looking at a situation in our day and age, we have child parents where you have to take care of younger siblings, how that contributes to your studies and how that really will pull you back when you are, you yourself, you are still a child that needs to be taken care of, but you are responsible for other children. And that might also be a source that might drive one to say the education is taking long and I cannot finish. Let me bring in Ayanda from the college. When you look at your population and your students, do you offer residencies? Are the students renting? Are they mainly coming from home to attend campuses? How is it looking?
Well, Sifiso, we've got, do I need to put on the camera?
Please.
Sorry. Okay, my apologies. With our students, we've got a variety of students coming from different areas, but most of them are coming from the surrounding areas. We've got, like for instance, I'm in the Roodepoort campus. We've got students coming from the surrounding areas in Roodepoort and also coming from Soweto, Kagiso, the neighboring areas. That's where our students are coming from. And then we do have some students that are staying in residential, what do you call this? They are renting. Those are students that are coming from far. However, we do not offer accommodation. Students then have to find accommodation for themselves, and then they then apply for NSFAS to then assist them with the funding of paying those rentals. Yeah, that's basically our setup. Yeah, that's basically our setup. We don't have residences, but however, we do have one particular campus, which is our farm, which then has a residential area, but it's not a population of more than 200 students in that campus.
All right. No, it's understandable. Ntabi, I'm going to bring you in. Looking at the findings that were presented by Shannon and the margin research, how common are the issues? Were you aware from your own observation, working with students at the college? Did these results surprise you? Or it's something that you had already picked up in your interaction with your students?
Okay, Sifi, so I was not actually shocked with the results because it's things that we deal with on a daily basis. In the 10 years of being in this office, let's start first here with I just want to give you a background of what the situation looks like. In the TVET sector, currently now at our college, we have just under 20,000 students. across the 7 campuses that we do have. And then 7,000 of those students are registered for a program called an NCV program, which is a National Certificate Vocational Program, which accommodates students that have only passed grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, meaning these are students who had actually dropped out from high school already, for whatever reasons that they might have dropped out from high school, could not finish their high school careers, so they don't have a matric certificate. So now they come into the TVET sector to try and finish or to close the gap between whatever grade that they ended at and the matric certificate. So the 7,000 students, not saying that the ones who are in a possession of a matric certificate have less psychosocial issues, but these ones, the 7,000 students I'm talking about, NCV students, are students who already do not have a good, what do I say, with a relationship with studies. So they've dropped out at some point for whatever reason. Some could be because they had to move from, let's say, the rural areas into Soweto because they've lost both parents and now they need to move in with extended family members. So there's a lot of psychosocial support issues that we are dealing with. And then when it comes to students, they've got a very high level of anxiety and stress. I had Shannon talking about students who hurt themselves. Yes, I've had a couple of students who have reported that they were cutting themselves, you know, where they feel like physical pain is better to deal with than emotional pain would be to deal with. So they'd rather cut themselves or go into substance abuse, something just to take a break from whatever emotional distress that they're dealing with. And then with the issue of public transport being a problem, I've had cases, I'm sure Ayanda also has, but yeah, we do talk about some of these cases at times. I've had about 3 cases where one student was actually kidnapped, and then she was raped for about 4 hours by taxi drivers on her way home from school. And then now this had created trauma at the to such a point that she was now afraid of taking taxis anyway. So meaning now she cannot travel to school, to town anyway. She cannot use any public transport anymore. So this had now made her scared to use public transport. And then I have 2 students who were kidnapped and then they were robbed also by taxi drivers or people that were driving a taxi that they trusted, took a taxi to campus, did not make it to campus because then they were kidnapped and then they had their belongings taken from them. So there's a lot of anxiety and stress in relation to traveling to or from campus by students that are not living within a walking distance to the campus. But even those who do walk to campus, we have one campus in particular in Dube. It's just at the corner, and right there by the corner, there's a field, like an open field that is not taken care of by anybody. The municipality is not taking care of that area. So we've had students who have been marked there. There was a girl that was strangled and apparently she had fainted a couple of times. This guy was attempting to rape her on her way to the campus in the morning. So it's things like that that would make them hyper, anxiety levels are just at a level that they cannot control. And then another thing that we're dealing with students who have learning barriers. But because I don't want to say it's a black thing, but unfortunately, as Africans, we don't. I think it takes us a long time to accept that there's a learning issue, or maybe because people are not really clued up about the different types of learning barriers. So, and then there's a thin line between a student with a learning barrier and students who are supposedly having a spiritual or ancestral calling. So there's those type of things that we're also dealing with. Students would not come to the campus for a period of over 3 months. And then when they do come back, they would say, no, I couldn't make it because I was trying to deal with their spiritual callings, or they had to go do some rituals and whatnot. And then they come back. Then the unfortunate thing is at the time when they do come back, their academic program has progressed to such a point where they are unable to catch up with the workload that they've missed. We've got students who have missed about 40 assessments. They did not write tests, they have not done assignments and anything, because our academic program is designed like high school academic program. Students are there Monday to Friday doing all 7 subjects every day, from 7:45 until 2:30. So it's not like in the universities where you have extended hours or you can attend your classes later in the evening and so forth. So it's strictly from half 7, 2:30, and then classes are over. So there's a lot that they're dealing with. Cases that have made to our offices, gender-based violence cases we've handled, sexual violence cases we've handled, learning barriers, like I said, anxiety, depression, stress, all sorts of things that you can think of, they've made it into our offices. And then another thing is that we find that the students who do come forth, like Shannon said in the presentation, that not everybody feels comfortable talking to us or talking to anybody about whatever it is that they're experiencing, unless someone would identify that this person is not the same or there's something wrong, and then maybe they try to convince them to go and seek assistance from the student support office, then they would make it to our office. So in a nutshell, I'm trying to say the number of people that we see in our offices, I don't want to think they make even 50% of the students that are actually dealing with something. The majority of them do not even come to us. And then I think the other problem is because of the population of just over 20,000 students, the psychosocial support issues or cases are only handled by 2 people within the college, that is myself and Ayanda. So we also need to be traveling from one campus to the other campus to another. And we survive because we have a network of people that we work with outside the institution. So we do a lot of referrals to our partnerships, those who deal with whatever cases. Like we have Sanka, where we refer students with substance abuse issues. And then obviously the substance abuse is not the actual problem. The problem could be something else that led the student into abusing alcohol. So the cases are not just what you get that is presented to you, but there's always an underlying matter that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, there's a lot going on. But I know that both myself and Ayanda are not really surprised by the finding. We agree with everything that was said in the research. Yeah, so I think if there's anything that maybe I could not get to, yeah, then we can go back to the question and answer session. Thank
All right.
you.
No, thank you very much. We are learning a lot that the success of a student is not just based on what is happening within the perimeters of a campus or the class, but really the environment where the student come from. I think that's what the research is teaching us. You look at some of the issues were issues that relate to home. And I think I saw indicate a finding that was showing that even the parents, some of the parents did not even have, like 28% of them didn't have any form of education or higher education, and it shows all that type of support you expect from home. If you're in an environment where you are overcrowded and you can't have the space to really study, it's going to put pressure on you, because those are the things that will discourage you to continue with your studies if you know that you are going to fail. I would also, but then you are adding something else now, the environment, that now it's no longer at home. A student is not safe traveling from home or from where to campus, and they are facing incidences that in a way leave them traumatic to the extent that they don't want to continue with their studies. I just want to ask something, perhaps a question to Ayanda Nota. How prevalent is this student dropout at your college? And what are the common reasons students give? I don't know if you're able to track them and say Why do they say they are dropping out? And how common is this dropout? I would say per year, looking at the number of students that you register, and you say this number will not complete their studies.
Well, Sifiso, in regards to that information, unfortunately, I do not have information for the entire college. However, I managed to get something for this particular campus that I'm in, just to give an example.
Yes.
With just this semester, the second semester, we do have some information of students that have dropped out, and I'll just read some of the reasons why they have dropped out for this particular semester. And I'd also like to indicate that sometimes our students will drop out without actually without deregistering. So there's a difference. Others will just ghost the college, will just not come, no communication on the reasons why they have dropped out. However, other students then, the ones that we will have are then documented as students that will then come and deregister and then give the reasons why they are deregistering. So not all of them do follow that process. However, I do have some an example here of some information that we have from the campus, Roodeport campus, of students that have deregistered. So these are our native students. Also, they are doing semesters. So those are students that have got studying towards a diploma. They've got a matric. So the reasons why they have now deregistered, and this is for the second semester, so meaning it's this term from June until December. They've already deregistered, and some of the reasons are amongst, they are saying that they are no longer interested in the course because they got space in another institution. They do not have money to pay for rent. One says, I do not have money for learnership. Others are saying that the bursary did not accept them. Others are saying that they've just gotten a job, so it clashes with the attendance of the college. Others are saying that they've got medical issues that made them to deregister. Others are saying that it's because of finances. So because NSFAS has not funded them as yet, so they need to provide for themselves to be able to come to school. So those are some of the reasons of the most current students that have deregistered from the campus. So it's not speaking to everyone, but these are just some of the reasons why our students are dropping out. So I just took a sample of what has happened currently from this particular campus.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Shannon, and then I'll also bring my two colleagues from the BMF as well as BBC. With this next question, really saying, looking at what the studies, the findings show, and what we have learned from the interaction up to this far, what are the support systems that we can put in place to really help students to succeed in higher education, not just in a TVET space? Because I would think that these issues, if they are common at TVET college, they might be common even in universities. I'm going to start with you, Shannon. Where are we missing? What is it that we are missing from a policy point of view, perhaps, and what can we do? What types of support systems can we do to really help students to succeed in their studies?
I think that the problems are extremely diverse and complex, as we've noted. There's just so many of them. There's social, psychological, etc. That I think that in relation to, well, I think that the research that we're going to conduct at Margins, for example, with the implementation of journals, self-reflection, etc., would be beneficial for the students. I think that that would help for them in relation to their individual sense. But then, like we've said with the social therapy approach, that it's about these wider systems and structures and the impact of these wider systems and structures, which is then impacting the individual. So I think it comes from introducing policies into the institution, so embedding the change that we want to see into the institutions, and making it like a long-standing kind of situation where it is just a part of the institutional way that the institution operates, essentially. Sorry to say institution so much. And I think that because we've highlighted that there's elements of support, there's elements of in relation to emotional support, elements of socioeconomic factors, it's about looking at wider society and then also implementing policies at a wider societal level to make the change that we want to see within education, and for the individual lives of the students who exist within the context of the wider society. So that would maybe include increased resources for the students. So if we're talking about transport, for example, that seems to be in our research an extremely high factor. 95% of the students in these colleges, they take public transport, and obviously, like I've said, self-identifying, the students have self-identified that as a prerequisite for dropping out of the TVET colleges. So one example would be to implement or put money into the transportation systems. That would probably help. So that's just one example.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ayanda and Papama, I'll start with you, Papama. And from the interaction that we have had now, what are your comments? What have you found interesting? And I think also tying down to my question in terms of what type of support system can we put in place to help students in higher education?
No, thanks, Chair. And good evening once again, colleagues. Obviously, I hope I am audible. Thank you very much. I think for me, Chair, the study does something very important. Is it gives us a framework to reflect the socioeconomic condition of South Africa. So I think it's an honest reflection of that. I don't necessarily think it deviates from a lot of the things that we are grappling with as a nation, but perhaps gives us a more accessible framework by which to package and develop those indicators so that perhaps we can measure and then come up with the intervention. So you talk about what kind of environment and what kind of support we should have in place. And I think there's something that struck me in what Shannon said when she said we're looking at the individual as an extension of their world. And so the question is, what kind of world is that? What kind of world is the South Africa of today? And we have to think about the fact that for instance, the question about the room, the what room do you sleep in, is a striking one for me, because that is not, even from a spatial literacy point of view, when we think about our social condition in South Africa, that is not unusual for a large number of the people we're thinking about. They're coming from rural communities, they're coming from township communities. So do you have your own room? Sometimes it's highly unlikely. You are in a very crowded home, so there's no room for solitude. There's no room to discover the quiet mind. And so where are the root problems? The root problems in our education system are in areas like low levels of literacy. We can't read for meaning by grade 4. If we're not getting solitude at home, if we're not getting the conducive environment at home, at what point are we going to be able to address this during the life cycle and the growth and the evolution of that individual? And so we take them to the TVET system amongst the other systems that we take them into. Do we think of the TVET system as a holding space in their transition? Or do we think of it as a transformative space, a space of transformation for themselves and the society around them, a place of empowerment for themselves and the world around them, and a place of development for themselves and the world around them? Is the agenda for transformation, empowerment, and development still a thing in South Africa today? Is it something that we are still embarking on as a democracy after apartheid and so on? So if we are going to be creating an enabling environment and to put the systems and the support mechanisms in place, we must then think about what is the nature of the environment that they find themselves in the TVET space. And I always find this both in universities and in TVET spaces. And I would say, if you're going back to the heading of this discussion, is like, could we think about decolonization from the perspective of innovation? Can we decolonize through innovation while depoliticizing the academy? In other words, there are many strikes that we find in these places of learning because, well, NSFAS hasn't paid and so on. There's a lot of protest that you find in. So when do learners or the students actually find time to engage the academy as a place for empowerment, for development, in order for them to become the innovators that will bring about a different social condition than what they find themselves in. And what I find is that we are missing the extended learning environment. And what I mean by that is the stuff that happens between and outside and beyond the classroom. We don't have a sufficient extramural activity kind of environment to find in these spaces. And so these students go into the class, come out of the class, and go back to that crowded space, go back to that environment in the city where they have to scramble for food because NSFAS has not paid. And I think what we should be doing is the work that Margins is doing, the BMFs of this world, are supposed to be supplementing that incapacity within the system with the auxiliary programs that are going to enhance that and create that a wholesome learning environment that educates the whole being of that individual. So I think for me, I will start there, Chair. I will start there around decolonizing through innovation, starting to think of the TVET space as a place for innovation, a place for entrepreneurship, a place where their ideas can find empowerment, development, and enhancement so that they see themselves as active participants and economic agents in transforming their own, the society that they find themselves in. I think that's the starting point for me, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I will invite Ayanda Masina to comment as well. Ayanda.
Thank you, Spiso. So I want to agree with both Papama and Shannon on the fact that there are other factors other than actually the education system, right? When we are dealing with the education system. And one of the things that I think was discussed here is food. You know, when you haven't eaten, you can't concentrate, you can't do much. And I remember when I was in university, I was at UKZN, there was at some point in time, in those years I was there was a sort of like a program that offered people food who didn't have food, right? And I thought it was amazing. I mean, you know, take away the stigma of, oh my gosh, people are going to know that I don't have food because I'm going there, whatever the case may be. But the idea really was that if you don't have, there's this place where you can get it. It was on campus. So for one, that I think is an important thing. Is it possible to have initiatives where we have organizations that will be able to, similar to feeding schemes in primary school, right? Can we have that at higher learning institutions? I mean, if you can at least now solve the issue of this person had one meal today, right? And now they're going to campus and they're at least having something whilst they are studying. So that's point number one, right? I think if we can have those initiatives and we can push them and we can find organizations that can support and finance this concept, number one. Number two, I really, really think mental health is very important. It's very important. And it would be great if we could have it for each and every course, each and every degree in university and in technicons and TVET colleges, where it is compulsory. It forms part of your credits for your degree that you need to attend, whether it's a one-on-one session, whether it's a group session, but we have to address mental health because so many of our people are grappling with these issues. You know, like Papama is saying, you're at home, you don't have the space. You probably don't even have the voice to say, hey guys, I'm struggling, because everybody's looking at you. Everybody's looking that we are looking that you're going to finish. And once you're finished, you're going to come and support us. And sometimes you can't share that even with friends. And maybe you just need that space and a third party, right, who is geared up for this. This is something that they do as a profession. And I mean, a lot of universities have counseling, right? So I think that it should be a prerequisite for each and every degree that you do counseling, or we have mental wellness sessions so that we accommodate everybody without putting a stigma around mental health, because that's the other thing. There's a stigma around it. And if 2 or 3 people are doing it, and then it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm being singled out. So if we do it for everybody, I really, really think that it will go a long way. And then the last one that I want to address really is the issue of women feeling safe on campus. Unsabi saying really spoke about all of the cases that they've had to deal with women being raped, going to campus,
Campus, yes.
that on its own is such a huge thing, because imagine you are going somewhere where you're going to better your future, and on your way there somebody violates you and it doesn't feel safe anymore to just go there. And even when you are there, you're always on the lookout, because nothing is safe for you anymore. In general, women in South Africa just experience a lot of abuse. So that one, I'm not particularly sure how we're going to deal with it, but we need to find a solution to almost make our women students feel safe, and I suppose to also a large extent our male students as well, because it's not a gender thing. It's just predominantly women who experience unsafe environments all the time, and they always have to be away. So for the first 2, I do have those solutions that I suggested. For the last one, I just think let's have the conversation. That's why we're here. Let's have the conversation about how do we create a space? What do we do? What are the things that we need to put in place? How do we start? It could be the start of the conversation of how do we make our campuses safer? How do we make getting to school safer? It could be, like Shannon said, providing transportation. So then I don't have to take a taxi. I can get on a bus, and it's much, much safer than getting on a taxi with people that I don't know. So yeah, those are my suggestions as a start.
Thank you, colleagues. Yes, I know Ayanda and Tabseng it indicated that they might not go up until the end of the session. I want to give them an opportunity to just summarize for us. They've indicated that the workload that they have at the college with the number of students that they have, and I think we have spoken, Ayanda Masina, about the importance of mental health and ensuring that all it's integrated in the study program of all the learners, whether through groups or through individual sessions. But I want to understand, I'll give them this question and then they will just answer both of them, and then so that when they are ready to leave, they can leave. How can mental health service be integrated into the education system in a way that better supports students? I think Ayanda Masina started the conversation, but I will give it to Ayanda and Tabiseng. I noticed that one of you was a lecturer before they became student support, so the experience is valuable. But how then can we integrate mental health in the education system? I will start with Ntabiseng.
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, Ayanda had to leave because she had logged in at the campus, so she was already feeling very unsafe. She was alone in the office, so she had to leave. Okay, I agree with Ayanda Masina that we need to do something. And in terms of student safety around the campus or traveling to and from the campus, what we had started to do was for students to travel in groups, so they wait for each other. And then so when they take a taxi, the student won't be alone or just the 2 of them in a taxi. And then others have already started, like not a lift club per se, but they travel in groups. They will get a taxi to come and pick them up from the campus. So it will be all 12 of them traveling to the same area with one taxi. So they've got certain arrangements that they have in place right now. And then for those who are walking, we have, is it community safety people that would come, but it's not a sustainable thing because they're not there all the time. They are there when we have incidences, and when things calm down, then they're not there again until something else happens. And then there's a lot of mugging that also happens with the students because they travel with laptops, they've got cell phones. So we've got a lot of criminal activity happening around the campuses. So there's a lot of things that we need to deal with in terms of safety around the campus and with them traveling to and from the campus. And then in terms of integrating mental health into the curriculum, it can be done. What we had started to do was to arrange with the, it's called life skills, with the life skills lecturers, life orientation, so that when they have certain topics within the curriculum, then they invite our partners to come and give a presentation on the topics that they are dealing with as part of the curriculum. When they get to a topic of substance abuse, then instead of the lecturer giving the information, we'd invite Sanka people to come and offer the lesson for that day, so that they've got professionals that they can ask questions which they are not comfortable asking us. And then in that way, they're able to access the service. When they're speaking to a lecturer, just giving them information or reading something from the textbook, it's not the same as when they are speaking to a professional who's dealing with this on a regular basis, where they're able to ask certain questions and even get contact details to call these people after the classes and say, but I also need help, or someone that I know needs assistance to deal with a certain thing. So we are trying to integrate into the curriculum. However, it's not everything that the students are dealing with that can be integrated into the curriculum. More so because I've already spoken about the time that they do have. It's like in high school, they attend all 7 of their subjects every day, and the classes are about 45 minutes long. So they've got a lot of work that they need to pack up. And then you also need to consider recess. They get a lot of holidays during the year, and there's a lot of assessments as well. So what we also do is we hold regular dialogue sessions with the students. Unfortunately, it does not accommodate all the students, because the partners that we work with also, they've got limitations in terms of the age group that they want to deal with in a particular time. We have a partnership with NACOSA. They speak to the students about issues of gender-based violence and give them skills on how to protect themselves in case maybe you find yourself in a situation of kidnapping, or someone is trying to violate you. So that program runs for about 2 days, but they only want students who are between the ages of 18 and 25 years. So meaning the students who are over 25 cannot be included in the program. And we cannot enforce this because they have their own requirements and they've got their own reporting structures. So we need to abide by what it is that they request from us. And like I said, it's not something that accommodates all the students. And because of how our curriculum is lined up, it's not easy for us to remove the students from the contact sessions to attend to these activities as much as they need them. So we do need to have conversations around how do we integrate this and make it compulsory, because you also need to remember that psychosocial support is not enforced on the students unless if it's hindering their progress in class, or maybe the lecturer sees something and then they encourage them to come and seek for assistance. Then they don't come. Even if they do come to our offices, we cannot enforce them to complete the 6-week program. If you see a student, maybe after 2 sessions they feel they're okay, they don't need assistance anymore, then we need to back off, because you cannot force them to continue with the sessions. We've had students that we've referred even further to psychologists, and then they decide, no, this is not for me anymore. So unfortunately, then we need to let them go. And then the other thing that we've done as an institution, as part of the registration process, because our registration now is done online. So after the registration, when the student has just acquired their student number, there's an assessment that they need to do. It's called a learner profiling. So what this program does for us is ask the questions which will enable us to see how many students do we have who are having mental health problems. Students, they ask you like by your entire biographical data. We want to know, who do you stay with, what does the family structure look like, what were you struggling with, why are you here with us, what are your hopes, what are you looking for, the type of program that you're registered for. So it's a lengthy thing that they need to do, but they do give it time because it's done at the time when they are registering, and it's an online thing which they can do it in the comfort of their own homes. So they do that, and then we look at the results after the registration. So we can actually tell you how many students who have psychosocial issues, or we've got mental health issues. But the unfortunate thing is, because these students are doing this at home, you cannot trust these programs 100%, because sometimes they're not comfortable saying that they've got learning challenges or they are dealing with certain things on the program. So some of these cases we only find later when they are already within the institution during their study periods. Like now, in the past 2 weeks, I had to take about 4 students to an occupational therapist because we had discovered that the students were not doing so well in their classes, only to find out that the student is actually having anxiety attacks during assessment period because they have learning barriers which they were dealing with from primary school already. Hence, they are with us because already they were too old to continue with their studies in high school. Then they dropped out from high school, and then they came to join us at the college with the hopes that because at the college previously we were doing skills, like it was a lot of work and a little bit of theory. But unfortunately, that has changed. It's a lot of theory. It's actually 100% theory and very few practical activities that they do. And then because of that, they get frustrated, and then they do what? They drop out. So, like I said, it's a lot that we need to unpack to assist the students. But yeah, curriculum integration can be done. It's just a matter of having to talk to the people who are is it making the textbooks, or who are dealing with the curriculum, and saying, for the students to be able to progress, this is what they need to have acquired within their first year or second year and so forth. But it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tabiseng. Very interesting. I think we're learning a lot, that the success of a student is really beyond what you can offer in the classroom. And when we think about the success of the youth going forward, and I think it's not just about higher education, but also in basic education, there are also high levels of dropouts. If you look at the number of students that register grade 1 and you track them, I think there's been some studies where they traced them up until matric. Then they realize that the number that registers drops out is get lost somewhere within the education before they do their matric. And I think understanding the social issues that affects education from a policy point of view, that becomes very important. I want to take this discussion further and invite my colleagues from the BMF and our researcher. First, I'll pose this question to Papama and ask, how does the current education system perpetuates inequality? I think we are there now discussing the issue of decolonizing the education system and creating an education system that empowers youth in terms of economical. But looking at how our current education system is, we can look at it from a basic education, from a post-school education system. How does it perpetuate inequalities, and what can be the steps that we can really take to begin to reform this education system, Papama?
No, thanks, Chair. So the previous speaker said something very important about the dropout rate. the frustrations that a lot of the students face when they are confronted with textbooks and there's a lot of theory and they can't apply themselves. What is often missing in the South African education landscape is the applied side of learning, right? So there is the over reliance on the theoretical and philosophical side of the academy. And I think the risk we are facing is that we are probably or possibly trying to model the TVET landscape in the image of the university. And so our true north as a country seems to be the university. And whether we do that consciously or unconsciously, I'm not sure, Chair, but that is what is going to keep reproducing the conditions that we face, because the landscape itself is in the image of an untransformed socio-economic system that we have. For an example, it's the swan song. The economy is concentrated in the big fours. There's severe inequality. There's severe spatial inequality. That unequal distribution of opportunities still forces rural urban migration and therefore concentrates people in certain kind of urban compounds or the like. And so those social conditions that are not enabling to the empowerment and the transformative agenda in the human psyche that these children bear are the ones that are going to ensure that even if you pump billions and millions into infrastructure, upgrading classrooms, doing all sorts of things, but the social aspects of the stuff have not been dealt with because at the underbelly we have not transformed. We have failed. We have failed to transform the socio-economic landscape of South Africa. So how do you, and I've been thinking about this as the colleagues were speaking, in the BMF, we've got a program called the YPDP, and it's an action learning program. At what point could action learning programs be brought into the TVET space, if at all? What we are suffering from is that long distance between what we learn inside the classroom and what we would ideally otherwise apply in the world of work at a practical level, because these technical colleges, and similar to what was called technicons, were supposed to be those places where industry meets learning, so that there's a lot more of the applied, the skilled, and all of that. And a lot of these youth are talented, they are brilliant, but they are frustrated because they are forever in this state of waithood, right? They are forever waiting and waiting for their infinite potential to be tapped into, for their brilliance to be showcased by them applying themselves in real tangible things that have got output. So, and I think that's also got to do again with the transformation question. A useless private sector that doesn't want to come to the party in terms of investing in the economy of the country and in transforming and the political order that kind of works in cahoots with them to kind of subdue or subjugate the transformation and empowerment agenda for making this a much more equitable society. So those political interests and economic interests in cahoots are reproducing the social condition that makes it impossible for us to have an environment where there's a shorter distance between what I'm learning at school and what I'm applying in the industry. You saw this in the construction industry in George with the collapse of that building. We are far more inclined to import people from outside of the country, even if they are not documented, than we are to create internship opportunities for TVET, skilled trainees who are supposed to be getting on-the-job training. So I think what is more accessible to us, and I think the colleagues in the BMF will relate to this better, is perhaps how do we think about deploying the action learning programs within the frameworks of the National Skills Fund, the CETA questions, and EPWPs, and sort of the social employment. And if you borrow from the outlook of the what was this fund that we had, the Solidarity Fund under COVID? Trying to create these pots of resources that can fund programs that are about creating real work opportunities for these people to actually see themselves being involved in something meaningful. So, at a simple level, Chair, you will look at the Ingwe TVET College scenario in Mount Frere, where the NYDA offices are located inside the campus of the Ingwe TVET colleges, so that the conversation around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship ideas for the learners in the classroom, or the students in the classroom, there's a shorter distance from them to go from theory and ideation towards actually an agency that is supposed to be putting money and resources behind their ideas. And there's a host of other configurations that we can think about, but that's one of the easiest ones that comes to mind. And it goes back to the point I made earlier, that maybe we need to think about, decolonization as innovation, or in innovation terms, and think about, excellence as a form of protest, because we almost have to equip these students with the ability to develop an internal resilience mechanism within themselves, because I don't foresee the social conditions around them improving materially in a significant way in the short to medium term, not with this political order that is trying to, do trade-offs for its own seats in parliament while they kind of wither in waithood. And at the extreme level of that, outside of this world of the TVET, where at least they've got some hopes of giving their ideas a chance to be tested and so on, there's kind of like the extreme perversion of that outcome, where the world of Amapara is waiting for them, whether through drug use and all these kinds of things. So I think we need to find a way to infuse these action learning programs as one of the most accessible, tangible kind of interventions that we have. Because if industry and the political order aren't willing to enforce transformation, to enforce the empowerment agenda, so that we bring about a much more equitable society, I'm not sure what else we have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Papam. I think we are learning a lot, that it's the connection, the line, or the manufacturing line to produce a graduate or someone that is learned. It's a variety of things that are involved, the social aspect of it, the economical aspect of it, and we have attested that some of these issues we might not be able to resolve them in the short term, but in the long term, what we can do is to really strengthen what our colleagues at Southwest Gauteng are doing in terms of psychosocial support, and what Margins is also doing, focusing on the marginalized, to really help them to deal with all these challenges, social challenges, in a way that helps them to really attain their dreams and attain their education despite of all these circumstances. Ayanda Masina, how looking at the current system from your side, the education system, how is it perpetuating the inequalities that we speak about?
Thanks again, Spencer. So when I think I'll give you two examples, right, of experiences that I had. So when you think about language is very important. If I am a Zulu speaking person, right, and I am taught something in English, which is a second language for me, I am at a disadvantage, as opposed to someone who is learning everything in Afrikaans. And I make this example because I went to an Afrikaans primary school. And they were taught, so I was in the English medium class. So I was taught everything in English, and Afrikaans medium was taught everything in Afrikaans. So you can understand that a person who's learning everything in their home language will always outperform you. When you look at UP as well, so that's my second example, but before I get there, so when you look at somebody learning everything in their native language, of course, things are going to be a little bit easier, right? Now I'm sitting here, I'm in the rural areas, I'm in the township, and I'm having to understand math and geography and history and science in English. I need to translate that first, right, into understanding it in my language before I can even attempt to find a solution or attempt to even learn or grasp the concepts. That's point number one, right? The second example is I like I said, I'm a lawyer. Well, I used to be. So I did law school, and I did law school at UP. Now I was there, it was for 6 months. For 6 months, every week, I went to a class and I learned law in Afrikaans. So you can imagine, right? Already, well, I suppose because my Afrikaans was good enough, I thought I could manage, and I did manage. I did okay, I did well. But so you can imagine now me sitting as an English second language, first language Zulu, speaking person in an Afrikaans class being taught law, not just any law in Afrikaans. So already there's so many barriers, there's so many hoops that I need to jump through in order for me to kind of then be on the level of my peers in that class. So that's, for me, one of the most important things, if not the important thing, that language is very, very important when it comes to education. I think that we need to really, really push this idea of having the language of instruction being other than English and Afrikaans. Because if you teach me geography in Ndebele, I might understand it better than geography in English. And so I really think that we need to it's going to be a very huge shift, a very huge mindset shift as well, to kind of get people to understand that it's more than just understanding concept. It really is language. And I think that it's an important thing that we need to look into. And also imagine just writing an exam in a language that you are very comfortable with. And then all of that, this one is, for me, maybe the biggest dream that I could put out there. Imagine in corporate sector, in government, in just outside of the schooling system, having to engage in languages other than English and Afrikaans. And I mean English, yes, because you're probably we're on a global stage, and you might want to go and work out the country one day, and English will be the medium that you will use. But imagine we are in Africa, we're in South Africa. Imagine going to a company and you feel so comfortable being assisted, and you feel so comfortable getting services provided to you in your home language. Imagine we create spaces that would give you that comfort, right? So I really, really feel that we need to Africanize. We really need to Africanize in our education system. And it really does come down to language for me. And when we move away from that so the education system and then get into corporate, listen, there are times when you in a meeting and you really just want to be like, man, guys, Lentini show is not making sense, and imagine being in a space where you can actually use your home language to communicate on a business level, business acumen level. I think if we ever get to that stage, whether it's in our lifetime or the next lifetime, we would have accomplished so much decolonization of not only just the education system, but just the way in which we work in South Africa, in Africa, from a corporate, from a overall system, right? So I really think, so for me, it would be pushing languages. Not that now you must learn, like my daughter, for instance, they have Zulu and Tswana in their school, and they've completely phased out Afrikaans at future nation schools, which is wonderful, right? But just imagine if they were being taught math in Zulu, they were being taught natural sciences, EMS in Zulu. That would be so amazing. And I think that when we get to that point where we are comfortable with our languages being the language of instruction in classes, in education, in corporate, we would have reached a level that, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine it. But I think that's where we need to go. Okay. Thanks, Fiso.
All right, no, thank you very much, Ayanda. I think it's an interesting conversation. I'm going to invite Shannon. When you look at the South African education space, what does it mean when we speak about decolonization, decolonizing education? I think the two colleagues have touched very important issues. Papama spoke about that we must look the education system from an innovative point of view. But also Ayanda recognizes that, especially when we look at those who are marginalized, that they are already going to the education system at the back foot because the language of teaching is not their own language, and all these other social issues that we have spoken about. So how do we decolonize the education system in favor of the marginalized? Shannon?
Hi, yeah, I think it's really interesting what my two colleagues were saying about decolonizing higher education. I think the language thing is especially it's an extremely important aspect of that. And I would go further than that into what's being taught in relation to the actual education that's being taught, because obviously people are excluded in relation to language, but then it's also the content of the material that's being taught and the impact that then has on the sense of self. So if, for example, the content material is Eurocentric, so it's based on Western ideologies and Western knowledge systems, and they're predicated as being the dominant or superior form of knowledge to be able to then participate once they graduate in wider society, then it comes down, and that's based on a Western belief, and you're in education and you're being given knowledge that's being designed that isn't related to your geographical location, that isn't related to the location that you are raised in, examples that aren't included in relation to your lived experience or your culture, and so on and so forth, then that can really impact the sense of image that you have of yourself, which then can also impact the way that you engage with education. So it can produce a disconnection from your studies, for example, and because you're not relating to the content material being taught. And this then has a role in relation to you engaging with your studies and deciding to continue, and also, like I've said, your sense of self. So I think that alongside, I think it's obviously more complex than that, and decolonization is not just to do with the course material that's being taught. It's to do with, the wider society, the systemic and structural issues within the institution and within wider society, and then also the way that knowledge is taught, the way that knowledge is produced, the way that it's distributed, and so on. But I think that by tackling the distribution of knowledge and the content that's being taught, then, like another individual was talking about earlier, to empower the students to be able to see themselves represented in the material, and yeah, to kind of go against the grain in relation to the dominance of Western ideologies of knowledge systems and production would be beneficial to then change the way that the individual views themselves, and could probably help to maintain interest in education and to also reduce the education inequalities that exist.
All right, no, thank you very much. I think it's an interesting conversation. We're looking at the whole education system, and when we speak about decolonization, also when we spoke about the method of teaching, it becomes interesting. I would also say the method of testing, because especially from a marginalized point of view, as someone that comes from margin, it only accommodates a certain level of IQ for individuals, and if you are abled differently, the education does not support you, and in a way your skills will not be able to contribute to the economy because you have not met a certain standard of criteria. So that's how we look at it. I just want to then pose this question. I will invite our guests in the webinar also to pose some questions, whether it's in a chat or in the Q&A tab there, so that as we close, we are able to reflect on the promise that we make is that the answers might not necessarily lie with the panel, but they are here in the webinar and we'll be able to share them. And I think, colleagues, I would ask you this question. Looking at how we have unpacked the issue of decolonization of education, what it means in the context of South Africa, I would ask then, what will be the economic consequences of not addressing education disparities amongst previously disadvantaged groups? And I will start with Ayanda, then I'll move to Papama, and then we will then Shannon.
I mean, so we are already experiencing it. We've always experienced it. In fact, we are probably even, what's the word when you go backwards? Oh, gosh, I can't find the word right now. But, you know, the middle class, that non-existent middle class, right? That tells you that regressing, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mpumza. Regressing, we are regressing when it comes to economic factors, right, and considerations with regards to the disparities in the education system, because already the fact that we do not have the same kind of access, right? I as a person who grew up in the middle class, I remember getting to university, and some of my counterparts didn't have to worry about residence. They didn't have to worry about fees. They didn't have to worry about anything really. Some of them even drove to school, right? So already that tells you that we are not on the same level. And that actually translates even into the working space. You go into the working space, you have the same education because you both came from the same university, same class, and you get to work and they don't have to think about rent, they don't have to think about transport because they already have cars and their parents have apartments for them, so they don't have to think about all of that. So it's an ongoing struggle of the haves and the have-nots, right? And it will always be there. It's unfortunate. We can try and put in measures or ways to decrease that margin between the haves and have-nots, but it's always going to be there, right? And the issue will always be that we will not catch up. We will not catch up. And it's sad, but it's true. So the economic consequences of not dealing with it is that it's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and generationally, it's going to get worse and worse, especially in Cyril's economy, where things are not looking good for any of us. So imagine now you are already on the back foot from birth, from the beginning, and then the economy is just not helping anything. And on top of that, imagine not having access to a higher institution or higher education. So if we cannot necessarily deal with the disparities in education at a lower level, it just becomes bigger and bigger the higher up you go, right? Because you don't have access to funding, you don't have access to information, you don't have access to the kind of people who would get you into the right spaces because of just where you landed up, right? And so if we don't deal with, so for me, I think the best thing that we need to do, right, is as people who, the BMFs and the BBCs, the people who belong to those organizations are now considered, or I would consider them a little bit more privileged than the people who do not belong to those organizations, because already by virtue of being there, it means you have some sort of access to a lot of things. Those people are meant to go back to the community and try and initiate a process where we get our education system, we get our children and our learners in the education system that is unfair, and we give them a better, I don't want to say a fair advantage, but imagine if somebody came to you when you were in grade 7 and said, you know what, I'm going to help you, that when you go to university or when you start working, whatever the case may be, you don't have to start from scratch, right? Because a lot of us, we are first generation everything. We're first generation at university, and so we don't know what to do when we get there. We are first generation in the corporate sector, so we don't know what to do when we get there. But now imagine an Ayanda who has gone through that process. I don't want to see anybody else go through that process. So it's on me to go back to my community and say, hey, listen, here's, almost want to say, a cheat code as to how to make things better for you. And I really think that it is very incumbent on us as the vanguard, the people who have some sort of access to the things that will make life better, because we have it better, and make it better for the people who don't have it. I hope I've answered your questions, Fiso.
Oh, yes, you have. Thank you very much. I think I saw Ntabi still on the call. Yes, I will also drop you in later, Ntabi. Papama, and then Shannon.
Yeah, Chair. So the great Dr. Ruel Khoza likes to say leadership is about competing for the future. And I agree with Ayanda. There's greater responsibility placed on those people who have what she calls access. I wanna give a plot twist, Chair, because I share a lot of what she has to say. But I want to provoke the room by saying, what if the economic prospects for South Africa in the next 10 years are really great? What if South Africa in the next 10 years is a really wealthy country, and has all the money that it needs and has all the resources that it needs to deal with all the social ills that it has? And I want to argue that in the horizon, that is possibly the case, because we've heard the stories about the oil drilling and all the prospecting that is happening around our country. And obviously, the people who are doing the projections there are talking all manner of stuff around all the wealth that the country could be endowed with to be able to afford its social transfers and all these things, and create a solidarity fund or a national bank and all these things. But the challenge, though, is that if the education system, if the social reproduction system that we have is not equipping that student that we are talking about with the requisite skills, building their internal capabilities and their skills to be able to be a competitive player in that future, we're still going to end up with a country dependent on social transfers from the state. So we're going to, because we're not dealing fundamentally with the question of an unequal society or with inequality as the underbelly of our social structure, we are forever going to be a country that is dependent on social transfers in a state that has got diminishing capacity to provide those social transfers, in a state that has got a thinning tax base, in a state where, as Ayanda put it, there is a non-existent or a fictitious middle class, because at the core of it, we are failing to transform this socio-economic condition into something more humane. And so even if we do become a very wealthy country, compared to Sweden or whatever, we're not going to have the human resources base in place to be able to lead South Africa into the next paradigm. For me, that's where the challenge. So I thought I'd twist it around and not see it as perhaps the economic pressures that will come from it, but actually the absence of the human resources base to deal with the economic opportunities that lie in the horizon, Chair. And I think that's really what we should be confronting the education system with. And I think there's a colleague of mine, Sis Nandi from the education department, she said some links here in the chat, which I think are very much important for us to look at, around the mother tongue issue and so on. But I really think, Chair, we should play squarely on this agenda of ours to say, how do these learning spaces become about ensuring that this person, as an extension of their environment, can defeat the odds in the environment and become an economic agent for a greater prosperous future and relieve our fiscus of the pressure of needing to provide social transfers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, National Chairperson. Shannon, any comment?
I'd say from the research that, or from the literature review that we've conducted, that it revolves around, well, the consequences of education inequalities continuing would be an impact on the economy, because people wouldn't have the skills to be able to effectively participate within society. And I was also thinking about decolonization and this question related to decolonization. And I was kind of thinking that, if we're talking about decolonization, then in theory, to be able to successfully participate, well, in order to have a successful economy within the wider constructs of globally, then it's kind of like you participate in, the economic system globally. And I think that's interesting in the context of this conversation, because can you, by reducing educational inequalities in general, and making individuals participate in higher education more, or sorry, not higher education, but education in general, would that, essentially what I'm saying is, I don't know if decolonizing, like participating in participating in education effectively would provide the conditions to be able to decolonize simultaneously, is what I'm kind of thinking about, and which one is more important. Hopefully that makes sense. Thanks.
Yes, it does. But we also looking at how we have framed and defined decolonization in our context, that it is not just about a lot of here in South Africa, when we're speaking about decolonization, when the students first coined it, it was more on the history of education and what was being taught in universities and the history of the country. But now we're beginning to shape it in a new direction. I think Papama spoke about the importance of having an education system that is innovative, that is futuristic, that is skills-based, not just we also spoke about the issue of the method of teaching and the method of delivering content to learners and to students. And I think those are the things. And as we bridge the gap in the education space, we might find ourselves really producing youth, young people, or people that when we speak about education, their level of education is also contributing to the economy of the economic prospects of the country. I want to invite Nthabiseng and just to get her thought on this one before we invite questions from the general attendance. And there's something that is coming out here, and Tabi, just want you to if you can just give us your thought on how can then, looking at now, not just at the post-school education level, but at an educational level, both schools and universities, how can we create a more inclusive environment for the marginalized youth? I think the studies showed the different challenges that marginalized youth face in the education when they pursue education system, higher education in general, from the issues at home to the issues of safety going to going to campus. How can we improve on that? Ntabiseng?
Okay, Sifiso, I think what the colleagues have mentioned in regards to doing what we can to assist the students, starting from primary school level, having this mental health topic as a norm. It must be something that is not only left to the students when they are older, but we need to start addressing stress or any other mental issues like bullying and whatever it is that is going on in the primary school level already at that level, to make it normal for young people to start talking about things that are making them uncomfortable. Because I would want to believe that these issues are not only experienced at institutions of higher learning. We've got learners who are already committing suicide at the ages of 10 because of whatever it is that they are dealing with at primary school level. So the inclusion of students addressing whatever issues that they are going through needs to start already at primary school level, to make sure that with them going forth with their education, the support structure has already been there, the foundation is there, that they know and understand that whatever it is that they are going through at the particular moment, they are not alone. There's structures that are put in place to assist them. So we should have structures or people that the people can consult when they need assistance from primary school level, taking it up to high school level, taking it up to we understand that social development is there to assist the learners, but like we said, it's only at school that because they spend a lot of their time at school, that most of these cases are identified at the school. And then if they are attended to from that level moving forth, then I think it will make it easier for the students to progress, to do their best to overcome the situations, and then maybe we won't have such a huge number of dropouts. If it's a learning barrier, it needs to be attended to at primary school level, and the parents must be involved, the community needs to be involved. So we need to get rid of enough stigmas, whatever stigmas that are out there, to make it normal for people to start talking about their challenges. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think we are getting to closure, but it's very interesting. We are learning a lot in terms of what it takes, the integration of education, that it is not just about what is happening in a classroom. There are all other factors that really influence, contribute to the success of a student. I don't know, Siobhan, from the Q&A, if we are receiving any questions. I had switched devices, so some other access I can't see. Siobhan, do you have questions? Oh, we do not have questions. So then, colleagues, I will just appreciate your contribution this evening. I think we had a successful webinar. It's recorded and it will be posted. There's more that we could have covered, but we are learning a lot in terms of what it takes to produce a successful student, and not just looking at focusing on a student when it's in the premises of a campus or at the college, at a school, but understanding these other social issues that really contributes to students dropping out. I see a hand from my good Dr. Mfoiwa from the Black Management Forum. in Gauteng, the chairperson of Gauteng. I'm going to recognize you, my leader. I was summarizing, but since you are here, I want to keep my membership. I don't want to be terminated. The floor is yours. Can we allow him access to speak, Scibo Mfoiwa? He has raised his hand. Operator, can we give him the microphone?
Oh, thanks, Chair. I hope I'm audible now.
You are.
My question is on the chat, but I see that the person who's supposed to read them I'm not sure if the person can see the questions, but I did put them. I'll just read them because I was thinking whilst you were talking. My questions are, anyone can take these questions. How is decolonization of education different from Africanization of education? Are differences substantive or semantic? Why don't we have an appetite to develop our own indigenous knowledge? Why do we always want to be included instead of creating our own things? Nowadays, we're always hearing China this, China that. Thank you, Chair. It's on the chat also on the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'll just leave it to the panel without pointing anybody. Can we just have a comment, colleagues? When we speak about decolonized education, how different is it from Africanized education? Is it substantial or is it semantic? Papama?
Chair, I don't think we have a conception of education and its intrinsic value. I think we think of education from an instrumental value perspective, and perhaps that's where the Western mode of education kind of creeps in. The great Dr. Lwazi Lushaba likes to talk about you know, development as modernity and modernity as development. This idea that our only conception of what it is to develop or development itself is to emulate effectively what the modern society has given unto us as a model for development. So, tied to that is the notion that you go to school to prepare you for a job. You get an education in order to be fit for employment. My colleague, Dr. Mfuiwa, will know that from the Eastern Cape hills that we all come from in our respective areas, you're going to have a tough time trying to convince your parents that you are also needing to be educated for the sake of being educated, for the intrinsic value of being a human being. And so I think we have not come up with an African or Afrocentric notion of trade that sort of can stand next to the Western conception of trade and economics that then legitimizes the idea that the world of work is a Western world of development, of modernity, and therefore the education system is designed in the image of the corporations and all these things to produce someone who is fit for that world. We don't think that there's an intrinsic value in just being a well-rounded human being. And I suppose we then locate this Afrocentricity and all these other things, the decolonization question, we often only leave it to the so-called soft skills. We don't think about artisanry from an Afrocentric perspective. We don't think about certain skills that are found in the African way of being in the world, whether it's agriculture, subsistence farming, using more natural methods in farming is seen as a kind of a slower version of output to the fast-paced production model that must get milk to the harbor. So I think that's the reality, is that we need to then go and have a conversation about what is the image of this Afrocentric society that we want to educate ourselves intrinsically first, before instrumentally, and then instrumentally to then be fit for purpose to act out what that society must look like. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you. I think you have answered for all of us. Just we are chasing time now. I saw one hand, Kathy. I will just recognize Kathy, and then we will then summarize. Is the hand still up? Kathy, do you want to contribute? I don't see anything else. But I think at this moment, I just want to appreciate Margins for the work that they have done, and with Southwest Gauteng, with the research that they have done, looking at the dropout rates and the reasons for dropout at Southwest Gauteng, and also for organizing this webinar and bringing together the Black Management Forum as well as the Black Business Council to look into the youth question, as well as the education system as we see it, and how is it contributing to marginalization, and how can we really contribute in terms of in decolonization, as well as what type of education system must we have that bridges the gap between the marginalized and those that have. And I think everybody has contributed to the discussion, the chats, and through the comments and the questions. Thank you, Ntabiseng, for coming in. We thank Ayanda, who had to leave earlier. We remained with Ayanda Masina. We thank Papama also for contributing. And we thank Shannon and our research at Margins also for the study that they've conducted and introducing to us. So it's been an interesting conversation, and what we are learning from it is that the things that we need to talk about, they are broad and they are many. We'll probably, between the BMF and BBC as well as Margins, find a way in the future to continue with this conversation and move forward, not just to have a conversation about conversation. And from this discussion, what is it that we can put in paper and contribute? We are living in the days of GNU. Perhaps it is an opportunity for us to put it down in writing and present to the relevant stakeholders, so that we are also shaping the direction of the education system in the country. So with these words, I just want to thank everybody who has contributed this evening, and all those who have attended, and good evening.
Thanks for steering the ship, Chair, and thank you to Margins. Thank you.